how do we reconcile the idea that one is saved or one obtains salvation by grace and not by works with a principle or an ethos of having a strong and important daily spiritual practice?
And, scientists have found out that our daily life consists of nearly 50-60% only of habits. How can we arrange our habits in such a way that they have a spiritual impact?
My name is Cyril War or Chandrasekhar from France, Los Angeles.
Oh, my name is Param Shreyadas from Germany.
And we'd like to welcome you to another episode of Bhakti Today. So the topic is, as we just said, spiritual practice. What's your thoughts?
Yes, spiritual practice, what it is? No work, no gain?
No work, no gain.
Yeah. So in order to reach a higher spiritual destination or to reach a higher spiritual consciousness, it will not come from nothing. We have to do something. We have to work for this.
Let me bring in one verse from the Bhagavad Gita that comes to my mind. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that detachment, which also implies spiritual attachment or spiritual advancement, getting closer to God, comes from what? What is it that comes from by detachment and practice? Spiritual advancement, right?
Okay.
You trust me on that? What's that specific verse? It comes by detachment and practice. Abhyasa.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Krishna is clearly saying that one obtains a spiritual goal by detachment and constant practice. So doesn't that make the process of bhakti yoga sort of mechanical? Like you do this and you'll get X result. How does that, like I asked in the first question, how does that jive, so to speak, with the idea of an independent supreme deity or God who, if he so desires, or if he may not so desire, grants you mercy or grants you, spiritual advancement?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say there's also this Bhagavad Gita verse 4.11, Yeyatamang prapatyante tangstataiva bhajamyaham. I reward everyone according to his or her endeavor.
As one takes shelter of me, I reward him accordingly. So that, like you say, clearly shows that there has to be some sort of endeavor on the part of the soul.
Yes. I think it's like in our normal relationship with each other, we also experience that if someone approaches you again and again with sincerity, you have no other chance to somehow reciprocate or at least
no choice but to.
Yes, and at least to think, oh, he has something serious in mind. I have to deal with it maybe. And in the same way, God also recognize or can sense it if we approach him on a regular basis even, and try to somehow connect with him and serve him and worship him.
So practically speaking, on a daily basis, and most of the audience who's listening to this, as 90%, 95% of people who practice bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness today live in the context of their own apartments or own homes, most of the time with family, most of the time with a particular career. So when we talk about having a strong spiritual practice, what does that mean practically speaking on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea, I think, is the theology of Vaishnavism, and I think we can put it on all the religions, is that we at our present stage of spiritual consciousness, we are so much on the material platform with our families, with our daily business.
Identifying with the physical body so much?
identifying with our material bodies. So on this level, we have not this ability to spontaneously always think about God and never forget Him.
Which is what Krishna asks us to do in the Bhagavad Gita. Manmana bhavamad bhaktuma dhyaji mam namaskuru. Always think of me, become my devotee, offer your love to me.
Exactly. And one of our great acharyas, Srila Rupa Goswami, he said the two main rules of our Krishna conscious praxis is to come to a stage where we always, every second practically, are Krishna conscious, and that there is no second where we are not Krishna conscious. So this is a very high level, and we cannot, from one second to the other or overnight, we cannot reach that stage of consciousness. So to go there, we need a daily practice or practice, so that gradually, it may take years, maybe decades. I speak from my own experience. It will definitely take decades, maybe even lifetimes, that we come to that
too negative
here. Yeah. So therefore, we cannot avoid this principle of going to that journey of having a daily regular practice.
I like the analogy of default settings on a laptop. You buy a laptop, it comes with default settings. When you turn on that computer, all those default settings, boom, go into action exactly as they were programmed to. Our consciousness, at least speaking for myself, and I think it would be the case with most practicing bhakti yogas, not to speak of those who are not very much inclined towards a spiritual life, have as a default setting in terms of their consciousness a dynamic of running, of consciousness going out of themselves towards sense objects, to try to enjoy sense objects, right? In other words, a consciousness of forgetting God. We hear descriptions in our scriptures, such as the Srimad Bhagavatam, the descriptions of the eternal associates of God when they descend on earth, or when they're hanging out with Him in the spiritual world. Their default settings, it seems, is the exact opposite from us. They can't help but think of Krishna. Like, we hear the example of, this is a little bit esoteric, but even a beginning hearer here can understand. Everybody who's hearing this has most probably heard of the cowherd maidens, the eternal girlfriends, quote unquote, of Krishna. And so there's some passage in some text by one of the Goswamis where they're having a talk among themselves. Maybe it's even in the Bhagavatam. And at one point they say, let's just stop thinking about it. Let's just stop talking. And let's just stop thinking about this naughty Krishna. He's only hurting us anyway. And then there's like a short silence. And then one of them breaks the silence and says, but when he plays the flute, it's so enchanting. Oh yes, and when he smiles, it's so lovely. And then boom, they can't help. Their default setting just forces them to think of Krishna and to talk about him. So as you said, the daily practice transforms our conditioned default settings, which have been in that mode for many, 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 many lifetimes, practically innumerable lifetimes, to what we believe is our actual original setting of the soul, which is spontaneous attraction and love for God, right?
Yeah. This reminds me of a passage also from the Bhagavatam, where the gopis, these cowherd maidens, they curse Lord Brahma, the creator of this universe, for having created eyelids.
Yeah, blink for even a split second.
Exactly, because when we, what it is, blinds?
When we blink our eyes?
When we blink our eyes, the gopis say, in this, this is a fraction of a second. They cannot see Krishna. And this short duration of time they thought how foolish this creator of the universe is to arrange to create these islets.
Right. So we're deprived of seeing Krishna for that much huge long time.
Yeah.
You know that story of Prabhupada on Juhu Beach in Bombay, that morning walk, and some devotee said, Prabhupada, sometimes I'm in Maya, you know? And Prabhupada said, no, you're always in Maya. Sometimes you're in Krishna.
Okay. Yeah. I slightly remember. I can identify.
Yeah, me too. So practically speaking, what are we talking about then? So we've kind of worked out the principle, the importance here, the philosophical explanation as to why it's important.
Mm-hmm.
But now coming back into the context again of most practicing bhakti yogis and bhakti yoginis who live at home, what are we talking about practically speaking? Or let's highlight some important elements. After you, I'll speak about rising early in the morning. But please,
Okay.
first.
Well, I have dealt with this topic of habits for quite some weeks now.
Yeah, you've been reading these books on the power.
Yeah, there's one very interesting book called The Power of Habit. And we have this word habit also in the Bhagavad Gita. In one shloka, Krishna says, Yukta hara viharasya, yukta cheshtase karmasu, yukta svapno vabodasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. He there says that a person who is regulated in his habits of sleeping, eating, working, and also interestingly relax.
Recreation, relaxing.
Yeah. This person, by practicing yoga, is able to avoid or remove all material pains to a minimum. So, and this is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. He stresses, so to say, that we should have regulated habits of these, especially these 4 areas: eating, sleeping, working, and recreation. So I thought, well, can we have some practical explanation of this, how this will look in my daily life? And of course, we have our sadhana. We can talk about this in some minutes, our morning program and so forth. But I then found this book, The Power of Habit, and I thought, well, this is kind of an extra purport. So Srila Prabhupada gives his purport, very essential teachings there. But in this book, I found a lot of information that made me understood why Krishna is stressing this point so much. And just to give you one idea is that scientists, they have found out that our daily life consists of 40 to 60% only of habits. Often we do 60% of the whole day is just habits. We do it every day, day by day, without thinking much about why we are doing it. So, and these scientists, the author is Charles Duhigg. He went very deep into that topic. Why are we doing it? And why are we so captured? Why is it that we cannot, by overnight, we can turn off some habits which we found to be destructive even? So, so that was one information that made me thought about this verse of Bhagavad Gita. And I really started to think, well, what about me? What about my habits? And why I am doing this sadhana, which was offered by Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He established a certain daily program And so it struck me practically. This is why we all should do this, because by that daily practice we can change very essential parts of our habits, and then also that will form our actions and our character, and finally our destination, to come to your original question in the beginning of our podcast.
Let me speak about the morning, the importance of rising early.
Mm-hmm.
You were just talking about how Prabhupada established a morning program. And if you go to a Hare Krishna temple today, typically especially it's been established, in the 1970s and 80s, other centers that are popping up now have more condensed morning programs, it seems. Mm-hmm. But the old traditional one, at least the one in times of Prabhupada, were very extensive, starting at 4:30 and then finishing at 5:15. That's just for the collective chanting, 3 particular songs, right? Then an hour and a half of individual chanting of rounds of japa, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra individually. And then another ceremony of singing together in glorification of Prabhupada, and then another kirtan, and then a lecture. So that lasts basically from 4:30 till about 8:39. So we're talking about 4.5 hours of sadhana. Now, for someone living in his or her own home, we've seen, and it's totally okay for that program to be essentialized. And as a matter of fact, as we often talk, and I often justify my chanting of my 16 rounds, not in one shot in the morning, although that's, if someone's able to do that, all the power to you, as they say. But Prabhupada himself, this is something that everyone who's listening here, who's not a monk living in a monastery, should, I think, feel happy to hear. And that is that Prabhupada said, when I was a householder, when I was married, I would chant 8 rounds in the morning, 4 rounds before lunch, and 4 rounds before dinner. Again, this is not a golden formula, but it is important, because some devotees in the Hare Krishna movement have this fanatical stance, and they actually preach that it's like you must chant your rounds all in the morning and everything. But my point is, look, if you're a householder, you have many responsibilities. And if it was good enough for Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, who set a perfect example, to spread out his chanting throughout the day, it's good enough for you. But let me just finish with this morning thing. Brahma Muhurta. Those who don't know what the word Brahma Muhurta is, Muhurta means in Sanskrit or Hindi a period of time, right? Brahma Muhurta is that period of time. And here, anybody can get this software for free, which is called GCal. You see right here, that's how it looks right here, GCal. And it's available on iPhone, it's available on Android. There's other softwares that calculate anywhere you are in the world, the Brahma Muhurta. What is the Brahma Muhurta? It's those 45 minutes, okay? 45 minutes that start an hour and a half before sunrise. So let's say sunrise is at 7 a.m. in your country, in your city. Brahma Muhurta starts at 5:30 and goes until 6:15. During those 45 minutes, those are the most important 45 minutes of your day. And unless you're living in Alaska, right, or in, St. Petersburg, where, for example, in the summer, Brahma Muhurta is like literally at like 2 in the morning, because of the region where you are, and the sun rises so early or so late. Generally speaking, for most of us on Earth, it can be a little tough sometimes, but most of us, with a little bit of effort, can be awake during that Brahma Muhurta. Okay. And if you can be actively chanting Hare Krishna, which is the best, or singing the prayer, Samsara Dava, the prayer to the spiritual master, which the author, by the way, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I think is the author, mentions that anyone who sings that song during Brahma Muhurta gets, the special blessings of the Guru and of Krishna. In other words, any spiritual activity, preferably chanting, because that is our mainstay, during Brahma Muhurta, then the rest of your day is basically good. So if you have a habit of getting up late, try to wake up and be awake and do nothing but chanting during those 45 minutes of Brahma Muhurta.
Mhm. I just thought about a movie I have seen 10 years ago, 30 Days of Night.
30 Days of Night.
It was a horror movie with vampires in northern Alaska. When you mentioned Alaska, I thought about this movie, and they had, I think, 30 days of the sun was not rising.
Uh-huh.
And it made me somehow chuckle because I thought, well, they had a pretty long Brahma Muhurta there in this movie.
No, it's still 45 minutes.
Anyway,
It probably started really early. Oh, no, because there's no, yeah, it's long. It's funny.
I don't know. Yeah, what you say is interesting. Mm-hmm.
Actually, the process of Bhakti Yoga is so simple, but you just have to kind of, do at least what you're supposed to, that minimum that we're supposed to do, we got to do it. And if you stop chanting, what happens when we stop chanting, when we disconnect from the chanting?
Mm-hmm. And your point of Brahma Muhurta, I think it is a principle. I don't think it is so much, it is connected, of course, with the rising of the sun, but we have to consider that all these teachings were composed in India, a place where there is the difference between summer and winter
is not so much.
It's not so much than
Granted, but if I may, though, I mean, who, you or me, who can deny that those 45 minutes, regardless of whether it's summer or winter, are very special? I mean, I don't know. Personally, maybe it's like, a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm just inventing something, but I don't think so. I genuinely experience a very mystical atmosphere during those 45 minutes where you can really go deep if you practice, if you pay attention, and the effects are, I don't know, am I dreaming, or is there something actually scientifically amazing?
Yes,
about 45 minutes?
I totally agree. I also have this experience, but I live in northern Germany, and yeah, there is a lot more a difference between summer and winter.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an excuse because Paramshreya feels guilty about waking up after Brahma Muhurta in the summer.
Yeah.
What were you saying? Sorry.
No. Your point is totally correct that there is a
Now I feel guilty because he didn't even laugh. So now I look like an idiot. Thanks, Paramshreya.
So what you said is totally correct, and I have to really think about my spiritual life. But the point is that there is one hard fact in your words, but also I think there is a principle involved. And I have just read again a book called Miracle Morning.
I heard about that one. That's also on my list of to-dos.
Yeah, let me see who the author was again.
Well, while you look for the author,
yes,
I'll plant, and maybe the next thing we can briefly talk before we close, and that is that we've established that chanting Hare Krishna is really the main practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we've all experienced that unless we feed the chanting with proper hearing of scripture, or hearing of one's spiritual master or spiritual masters, or of Prabhupada, then one's chanting is not very strong, and one doesn't have much enthusiasm at all for chanting.
Right.
And maybe we can talk about that next. But who's the author?
Yeah. The author is Hal Elrod. Miracle Morning.
Miracle Morning.
I very strongly recommend. And this is also a kind of purport to that verse, Yuktahara Viharasya, and I think confirms this principle of Brahma Muhurta, that we should start our day with some deep spiritual practice before the real day, of family life, of going to work.
Can you tell us what your habit is regarding your cell phone and social media?
Yes, my habit is, I have strongly worked on it. It was not easy, But I found out that for me, and I think for many devotees, for many spiritual people, it is very important to switch off that phone during these important early hours. Let's say if it is only 1 hour you can afford, which is your so-called miracle morning or your morning program, then my strong recommendation is that we switch off these gadgets, because just these notification sounds has such a strong power. We start to think, what was that? Who has sent me a WhatsApp or email?
And maybe it's a girl, or maybe let's be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest.
Maybe it's a girl, or maybe it's a guy who likes me, or maybe it's something that's going to give me some well, to use an ISKCON lingo, some sense gratification. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, if I may quote Bhaktivinoda Thakur, last summer I went to a festival in Ukraine where Mandakini Prabhvi, or Mataji, however you want to call her, Dasi, Prabhupada disciple from France, who was actually responsible basically for spreading Krishna consciousness in all of Russia. Right? She was the wife of the first disciple of Prabhupada in Russia. So she was on Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance day. She was reading his biography and his daily schedule. And what really struck me, and like you say, it's hard. I still try to practice it, and I still fail, but sometimes I do it. And when I do it, I'm very happy. He had a policy of reading and writing correspondences, which is the equivalent of checking our emails and Messenger and WhatsApp and so on today, after breakfast. So if you're able to withstand that and touch those things after breakfast, that leaves that whole morning time it transforms that whole morning time prior to what you call the real day, quote unquote, as a sacred space where you can really have one-on-one time with God.
Right. Yes, definitely. And yeah, we are living now in the year 2019. I would say that if Bhaktivinoda Thakur would be here now, he would also switch on
off his Facebook notification
after breakfast.
After breakfast. What about reading? The importance of reading, like the Bhagavatam says, right, that one who has attained Shushusho, right, that first canto, second chapter, Shushusho Shadadanasya Vasudeva Kata Ruchi. So one who's developed a ruchi, a taste for hearing. And so that taste, how does that taste for hearing, and therefore for chanting, for hearing one's own chanting, develop? My understanding is it develops precisely by associating with Scripture and those who speak on Scripture, and by hearing Krishna and Krishna's glorifications and the philosophy behind our practice, one feels empowered to chant, isn't it?
Yes, I agree. There's also this other verse, I think in the same chapter, Nashta Prayeshva Bhatreshu Nityam Bhagavata
Sevaya.
Bhagavat Yutama Shloke Bhakti Bhavatir Naishtiki, where it is said that by regular service towards the person Bhagavat and the scripture Bhagavat,
by regular attendance in hearing the Bhagavatam.
So if we do this combination, we serve the Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatam, as a scripture.
By hearing it
and listening to it, and also by serving the instructions of the person who is the personification of the Bhagavatam, who lives according to the Bhagavatam principles. Yes.
I just say I can't count, and I'm not saying this to show off, but maybe as an example for those who are starting their spiritual life. I mean, after all, we have like more than 25 years of experience in Bhakti Yoga that's starting to accumulate, and I can't count how many hours I've spent just in the bathroom alone. What to speak of taking a walk and putting on a headphone, listening to lectures, listening to audiobooks, the amount of hours I've spent, listening to lectures and audiobooks while brushing my teeth, while driving from one place to another, while doing, household chores that don't require that, where you can basically do on automatic, like washing laundry, washing your clothes and so on. We really are supposed to use as much of our time getting absorbed in hearing about Krishna. And the more you do that, then the more your chanting is on fire, or at least is adequate enough, so to speak.
Exactly. That was also my observation when I read in the morning from the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Oh, by the way, Paramacharya does his daily, how do you call it? The daily Bhagavatam mirror?
The daily Bhagavatam mirror, yes.
The daily Bhagavatam mirror, where you actually read the Bhagavatam every day, so you can join live with him.
You can check it out on my YouTube channel, Krishna West in Germany. And what I observed again and again is that when you read in the morning the Srimad Bhagavatam, or go to the classes in your local center, and you
Make
notice...
sure to wear a dhoti, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had to put in a joke about dress code with my usual arrogance and condescendence. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think many devotees who are listening to this podcast, who were, for instance, to Vrindavan for 2 weeks or so, and they go to the morning program, and every day there is one verse, and the next day the following one. And I noticed, I came there and I realized, okay, it's the story about Dhruva Maharaj. Okay. And then I cannot maybe switch or tune in at that very day. But then next day I come back, sitting there listening to the class, and then, it's like Lord of the Rings, version 1.
Okay. Episode 1, episode 2, episode 3.
At one point, you have to go to the next movie just to find out what comes next.
Right. The sequel.
And this sequel, yeah. So this same experience I got again and again when I seriously start to read the Srimad Bhagavatam on a regular basis, or visit some local temple or center. Then the taste, this hankering of how will it go on now? What will Dhruva Maharaj do now? So, and when this stage is reached or attained, you often find during the day you're sitting in the bus or driving car, or I don't know, you start to think about those stories, and not about, there are so many mundane sequels on Netflix. This is very, very, there is a big hype now again on sequels. People
sequels and series also. I mean, series can really get you locked in. They have, yearly seasons.
Yeah. So this is the best cure to not fall victim to, end up at Netflix and watch all these series.
Of course, we're not advocating that you should never watch a movie. You should never watch a YouTube video other than, this video of your spiritual master speaking. But something very real has to be said about this principle, that the more you absorb yourself in thoughts of Krishna, the more spiritually uplifted you feel, and the more you absorb your thoughts in thoughts not related to Krishna, the more anxiety, the more just materially absorbed you feel. I think that's just like undeniable fact. And afterwards, one has to gauge his own or her life. Where does recreation enter into the picture? What ashram am I in? Et cetera, et cetera. But the principle, as you're explaining it, and as I'm explaining it too, has to stand firm.
Yeah. And this goes back to your question about the chanting. When you are absorbed in Krishna's pastimes, or in the pastimes of the Bhagavatam, the teachings of the Bhagavatam, then your enthusiasm in taking the beat back and
increases.
chant japa is much, much stronger.
What was that story where Prabhupada saw someone's bead bag hanging from a door knob somewhere and said, whose beads are crying over there? Whose beads are crying over there?
This is so good. Okay. Yeah,
All right. Do we have anything else to add?
Yeah, so how is your daily sadhana? I think, as you said in the beginning, the sadhana that Prabhupada established 40 years ago or so.
The entire morning program. Yeah, I have a condensed version.
Years.
Right now I'm staying at a temple, the guest room in the ISKCON Ljubljana temple, so I'm kind of doing the whole morning program. But when I'm staying, you know, like for 2.5 months, I was in Montpellier, right in the south of France, and I try to make it a point to, you know, boil some hot water, put it in a thermos next to my phone, which I put far away from hand reach from my bed, and you know, I put the alarm on. If I have to, you know, sleep a little less than 7 hours, which is my, you know, my sort of comfort zone, because I want to be awake for Brahma Muhurta, I'll do it, and then I'll take a nap later on. But generally I try to sleep, you know, 6 or 7 hours, and I try to wake up basically, you know, 7 hours after I go to sleep, and hopefully that's before Brahma Muhurta. But to get me out of bed, I put that hot water, and I get up, turn the alarm off, drink some water because it dehydrates you and it hydrates you and wakes you up, and then immediately hop into the shower. And in the shower, I have a bucket, a 10-liter bucket, empty bucket that I fill up with hot water, very hot water, and I stand in it. I
thought you mentioned cold, ice cold
hot.
water.
No.
With cubes.
What's his name? Anthony Robbins does that. He literally jumps into an ice cold pool. No, what I do is I heat up hot water into a 10-liter bucket, or, you know, large enough to put your 2 feet in. And then I take a hot shower, and then boom, I switch it to ice cold. And I just, you know, put ice cold water on, you know, on the face, on my neck, on my genitalia, between, you know, in my armpits, where there's all these glands that, you know, that are activated. But because your feet are in the hot water, it's much easier, because apparently there's all these, you know, according to Chinese medicine, all these points, acupressure points or stuff, channels are in the feet. And so when the water's hot, they open. So as a matter of fact, the effect of the cold water on the rest of your body is better when your feet are hot. And it's also just a lot easier to do. And then I switch back to hot, and then back to cold, and I do that 2 or 3 times. I'm not saying everybody should do that, but I do say that you should take a shower, even if it's a hot shower, no problem. Take a shower as soon as you wake up, because that brushes away the mode of ignorance, which we don't have much time to talk about, but I'm sure most of our audience knows about that. And once I've taken a shower, and then I just chant. I either do I like to log into the Mayapur TV and do, you know, either a Mangal Artik or a Guru Puja, logging into either, you know, ISKCON London or ISKCON Radhadesh or wherever. I even like this maybe sometime with the 24-hour kirtan in Mayapur. And then just go on a japa walk and chant, you know, chant at least 8 rounds. And then the rest of the day, you know, unfolds. I may finish all my rounds, I may read, I may whatever. So that's my sadhana.
And what would you suppose for a family man or woman?
I think everybody can do that.
With 3 children.
I think any family man or woman can do that. You can more or less wake up as early as you can. You can take a shower, and you can chant an hour of japa
before your children may rise.
Yeah, although I heard, it's very interesting, I heard some family telling me that they purposely chant their rounds in the presence of their kids, because otherwise a lot of times these kids grow up and they never see their parents chanting, and so they don't learn by example. It's interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
You basically do the same thing, I assume.
Yeah, I try to go to bed at 9 o'clock, because when I wake up at 4 o'clock, then there is no excuse for the mind. I have slept not sufficiently. So, but even it's I also read this in the Miracle Morning. That struck me also. He said that the last deep thought of your day when you are lying in bed about
Bhakti
to
Tirtha Swami used to say that too.
Okay, so the last strong thought of your day when you are in bed, you wake practically up with that same kind of spirit.
So true.
Yeah.
If you read the Krishna book before going to sleep or hear some pastimes of Prabhupada, then you wake up.
Strongly recommended. Strongly
recommend.
And this Hal Elrod, he said that when you, let's say you go to bed at 11 o'clock and you want to rise at 4 o'clock, and when your mind strongly is saying, oh, this is only 5 hours, you will be devastated next morning, you will be so tired and you will not chant your rounds. If this is your last strong thought and then somehow you fall into sleep, then when the alarm clock is ringing, you wake up in the kind of this same mood. Oh, as I told myself yesterday, I am so tired, I am so devastated, I'm not able to chant my rounds properly. So this Hal Elrod, he made experiments. He also told this to himself when it were 8 hours. So when he had 8 hours to sleep, he told himself, oh, only 8 hours, you will be totally devastated. And I could remember I once did the same, and it really, there is some truth in it. You wake up devastated according to your last strong thought the day before. So just to finish this should not mean that you can only sleep 2 hours a night, and you think, oh, I will just. But usually, or we should take our sufficient sleep. I think everyone knows how much sleep he or she needs. But if by some circumstances you may go into that situation, oh, I have only 5 hours this night, then still wake up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock and try to do enthusiastically. And my experience is that occasionally, if that happens occasionally, you can also go through your morning program quite in an easy, jolly mood.
Yes, good point. Great. I think we've covered all the bases.
Yes, so if you also are into spiritual practice in the Krishna conscious area, or even in another tradition, maybe you like to reveal in the comment section what your daily spiritual practice is, your habits, your spiritual habits
as well
every day. Pardon?
Or what your daily struggles are. Because let's face it, sadhana comes with struggles, as we've described.
So that would be very interesting, or how you adjust your individual morning and evening program. But for all of us, it would be possible to make this 5-hour morning program. When I was in Vrindavan last time, I recognized that they first go to the Prabhupada Samadhi, sing the Gurvashtaka, then they go into the temple, then they sing this Vibhavari Shesha. And I thought, well, this is unknown to me. A new item.
This was introduced by Narayan Maharaj.
Okay, interesting. So, and then the regular stuff, and then they did Guru Puja and put Prabhupada, a small Utsaha Murti of Srila Prabhupada, on the arms, and they circumambulated the temple. I don't know if this is still going on.
Yeah, it's still going on.
But this also took, let's say, 20 minutes. And then finally the class was there, and I really, I'm up here since 3 o'clock or so, 3:15, and maybe this is not practical. Maybe you have not that stamina to
the physical stamina to be up and do it. Therefore, just do some hearing every day, like here a half hour, here minimum a half. If you can. I mean, there's no strong rule, but try to do some hearing, because that hearing is going to feed your japa.
Exactly.
You can really reduce it to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So don't forget to subscribe this channel, Easy Bhakti, and ring that bell.
That notification bell.
And by this you get automatically notified as soon there is a video uploaded.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Param Shreya.
Hare Krishna.
Take care. Hare Krishna.